Hey everyone, this is Brian from Madness and Motive. On Thanksgiving night, 1985, three members of the Blount family from Fort Worth, Texas, were killed in their home by an explosion. And the man found guilty of the crime and sent to death row would walk free almost 25 years later. This is the story of the Blount family bombing. The year is 1985. We Built This City by Starship is on the radio. Back to the Future is in movie theaters. And Cheers is making American families laugh together in their homes. On November 28th, Thanksgiving Day, the Blounts are excitedly preparing their home for a small family gathering. They live at the Hilltop Mobile Home Park in Fort Worth, Texas. In attendance was Joe Blount, 44 years old, his wife Susan, his daughter Angela, 15, and his son Robert, 14. Also in attendance were his brother Ray and his nephew Michael, who was 18 years old. In the late afternoon, around 3 p.m., Ray and Michael arrived at the Blount residence. They greeted each other, shared stories, shared laughter, and then sat down to eat. They passed food around, piled their plates high, and enjoyed a meal together, just like millions of other families did in America that day. At around 5 p.m., things were starting to wind down, and Ray actually said goodbye and headed home. Michael actually stayed behind and hung out with the Blounts for a few more hours. Around 9 p.m., even though it had been a long day, there was still a lot of energy buzzing in the home, except for one family member, Susan. She was really tired and went to the back bedroom to lay down for a while and summon some more energy for the rest of the night. As she was headed back, Joe let her know that he was going to take the kids, Angela, Robert, and Michael, to the convenience store for some snacks, ice cream, and some beer, which of course was just for Joe. They all hopped in the car, and Joe took the kids to the convenience store, and Susan laid down for a rest. Just 10 minutes into this rest, Susan was stirred by what she thought was a knock at the door. When she heard it, she got up, she looked out the window, and she surveyed her property. She didn't see anything, so she thought nothing of it and went to lay back down. 10 minutes after that, at around 9:20, Joe and the kids arrived back at the home. They shut the car doors, walked up the driveway, and they saw something strange that gave them pause. It was a briefcase that was sitting on the front steps of the home, right in front of the front door. Since it was Thanksgiving and such a happy day, the group wasn't suspicious or anything. And in fact, the kids had a lot of curiosity and interest in the briefcase. So they all took it inside, and Angela placed it on the floor in the living room. Michael, Joe's nephew, was close by with Angela investigating the briefcase, while Joe and Robert stood a few feet back. Angela couldn't resist knowing what was inside the briefcase any longer, and plus, other people in the group wanted to know if there was any way to identify the owner of the briefcase so they could return it to them. So Angela started to unlatch the case and open up the lid. Unfortunately, when she did, it exploded. Some reports say that there was a pipe bomb inside, but what we do know is that there was an explosive device inside that was very powerful, rigged either to go off when the briefcase was opened or on some kind of timer. Unfortunately, the blast killed Joe, Angela, and Michael. Robert was blown from the home by the force of the blast, but he wasn't killed. He was badly burned on his hands, and his shoes were actually melted to his feet. Susan, being in the back bedroom, was in just the right spot to be left relatively unscathed, although she, of course, did hear the blast, got up, and tried to reach the living room, but was unable to because the floor was so hot. She managed to find her way out of the home, and unfortunately, as she was making her way out, she did look into the living room and see her husband laying there engulfed in flames. Susan was left to pick up the pieces and make sense of life again after this destructive event. She lost her husband, Joe, her daughter, Angela, and her nephew, Michael. And her remaining son, Robert, had horrendous injuries. Police investigated the property. They asked neighbors if they had any information, but leads ran dry and the case went cold. There were no suspects and no information that could lead them to figuring out who left this briefcase on their doorstep and who created the device inside. There were no suspects and no answers for 12 years. Until 1997, police caught a break when people started talking, and this information led them to a man named Michael Roy Tony. He had been in and out of trouble with law enforcement since 1985, and he was actually in jail awaiting a hearing for burglary in 1993. At this time, one of his cellmates, Jack Ferris, told police that Michael had confessed to the crime. Another one of Michael's cellmates, Finis Blankenship, had told police that Tony said he was paid $5,000 to leave the briefcase on a doorstep with the bomb inside, but he had left it on the wrong doorstep. He went on to say that Tony told him this was all part of a drug-related hit, and it was known that there was a lot of drug activity in that neighborhood. The information from the cellmates led police to some additional witnesses. First, Kim, which was Tony's ex-wife, and Chris Meeks, Tony's former best friend. Kim and Chris Meeks had been with Tony on one occasion when they drove to a propane shop that was right next to the Hilltop Mobile Home Park where the Blount family lived. Kim said Michael Tony got out of the vehicle with a briefcase, and when he returned, he no longer had the briefcase. Chris Meeks supported this story. However, it is to be noted that Kim initially said that law enforcement were crazy to look into Tony as a suspect, and Chris Meeks' story not only misaligned with Kim's, his own story changed 4 times across different police interviews. Nevertheless, based on the information provided by these 4 people, police had enough to make an arrest. Michael Tony went to trial, was found guilty, and was sentenced to death in Texas. The Blount family were able to enjoy some semblance of closure for a period of about 12 years, until 2009, when new information came to light. It was found in Michael Tony's trial that 14 pieces of evidence were withheld from the defense by the prosecution. Not only that, but Michael Tony had no known connection with the victims, and there was no physical evidence that could tie him to the crime. Because of this information, Michael Tony's case was re-reviewed, his execution overturned, and he walked out of prison a free man. Just before this happened, Susan Blount was quoted as saying, "They're dragging it all up again. It's never going to go away." In fact, when Michael Tony was in prison, he's said to have written Susan Blount up to 43 letters proclaiming his innocence. It got to the point where Susan had to ask the prison to stop delivering the letters. It's clear that the Blounts believe Michael Tony is the man who left the briefcase on the steps that fateful day. The Dallas Morning News interviewed Robert Blount, the surviving son of Joe, and he was quoted as saying of Michael Tony, "All I can say is, let him come to my house. I'll drag him inside and I'll beat him within an inch of his life." With the physical and emotional scars still there, the Blounts had no choice but to watch Michael Tony walk free. But the story doesn't end there. Just 1 month after being released from prison, on a foggy Saturday morning, Michael Tony got into his truck, turned the key, and started driving down a country road. He lost control of the vehicle, crashed, and was killed. Unfortunately, it didn't end there for Susan Blount. She found Michael Tony to be so manipulative that she initially didn't believe he was actually dead. She's quoted in one article as saying, "I do not trust that man could actually die that easily." With 3 members of the Blount family gone, Joe, Angela, and Michael, and the only suspect in the case exonerated and dead just a month later, this case officially remains unsolved. Was it a targeted attack? Joe had no known enemies and was a well-liked mechanic in the area. Or was it a drug-related hit and the briefcase was placed on the wrong doorstep? We know that there was drug activity in that neighborhood. With decades past, physical evidence destroyed, and witness statements conflicting and tainted with incentive, we may never know. We can only wonder, hope for a new lead in the future, and hold our loved ones close. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I think this is a story that's important to shed light on. There aren't many articles or videos on this case, and I think it deserves some awareness. If you did enjoy it, give me a like, subscribe to the channel, tell all your friends about it, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.